Hey, everybody. This is a great time to get in the game. Opportunities are everywhere because, according to the latest media reports and resources, the sources are out there saying that there's approximately 13% of childcare centers across the United States have closed. So 13% have shuttered. An additional 10 to 15% of daycare centers nationwide are distressed, looking for a buyer, or about to close. So literally 25 to 28% of any market is in either closed or about to close. And so you want to be looking around your marketplace. And that's what today's topic is how to actually drive around and Google around to your market and giving you a list of resources to focus on market research. Because I don't want you to go into site selection and licensing and jumping in to all of those steps before you truly understand the nuances of what's going on, supply and demand in your market. Speaking of supply is way down because people are closing or stressed, and there aren't nearly as many spots that are high quality, good spots for families that need it to come back into the workforce. So there's more demand right now for quality childcare than supply, than any time in history or recent history. Okay, so this is the time, which is why we had to come to you right now. So I'm just gonna frame these questions up, Jen, and then you can speak to your story of how you came to the marketplace in Louisiana and looked for what you were going to do to build out your childcare center. And there's really three options here, and we'll dig more into them. Takeover is taking over an existing operating childcare center, somebody that needs to be purchased, that wants to get out of the game and wants to sell their school to you. That's number one. And there's pros and cons to each. There's buy, rather build. So you can build from dirt, building from dirt, or you can buy a franchise and buy into a buildable model based on a franchise system. And that is the most expensive of the three options, but it is the right option for some that want a specific model or framework, or you just want to build a beautiful school from dirt and you have the finances, takes the highest level of funding to do that. The final model is what I call empty shell. So finding a building that doesn't have an operating school in it and figuring out how to make it purpose-built to work for you. And oftentimes the landlords of these buildings or the sellers, if you do seller financing even, can roll the build out of the design, the interior design of the school and the restrooms for the little ones and however you need it to be built out, taking over an empty shell or leasing an empty shell. And there's pros and cons again to each. So I want to hear Jen's story vis-a-vis this framework. Is how do you decide which one and what are the pros and cons? And we'll talk about that. And then buying or leasing the real estate, which makes sense for you. Oftentimes it depends on what your budget is, how much cash you have to bring to that particular deal. And owning the real estate is a long-term play for wealth building. So I know people who start out leasing and then they work with the landlord to buy the real estate as a second step once you get it cash flowing. So there's so many different models and ways that you guys can do it. There's no one right way. But before we dive into all of those questions, we're backing you up to a 10,000 foot view to actually just look at your market. Understand the nuances of the opportunities of what's going on in your market before you dive into these questions and start trying to answer them, because that's what we all naturally we want to go to. Oh, I just found a building. Or no, let's take a minute and take today and during this challenge and really understand. And that's what winners do is they research the market well before they start the business. And myself, and I'd like to hear your story, Jen, but just myself, I researched early learning industry and what was going on with business coaching in early learning for about 18 months before I actually opened up my coaching business, because I wanted to understand who was doing what I'm doing, what are they doing to set themselves apart, how are they teaching business startup training for daycares and childcares, how are they teaching marketing and enrollment, and then am I going to differentiate myself. So way before I even put my shingle out, I was doing all of this research, guys, and that's what successful entrepreneurs do, is they find the hidden ways to monetize their services and their products before they even start. And so, Jen, just queuing you up from that, tell us a little bit about your story. You were in Sulphur, Louisiana, and I know that you had a background more in marketing and sales, and then you came into early childhood. So just let the folks meet you and tell us a little bit about you.
All right. Hi, everyone. So I am Jen. And Chris, you're talking about opportunities are everywhere. And that's really how I got into this is opportunities were available. When I got into it, it was 2006. And you're right, I did not come from a childcare background. I had a lot to learn. So if you have childcare background already, you were ahead of the game than I was when I decided to do this. The center my children went to, actually, the lady was looking to retire. So, looking at your different models, takeover, build from the ground up, or find an empty shell, I had the opportunity of a center that was already open. And because I knew nothing about this, when she asked me if I would be interested in purchasing her center, I thought she was crazy. And I thought, no, I am not cut out for this. I am not built for this. And the more, I thought about it and prayed about it and, just kept thinking about it, I'm like, okay, I think this is the right move. But, I needed to do my research as well. So, I actually worked for her for an entire year, doing everything from every single classroom, from every single job, all the way up, because I wanted to work in every position, know everything about it. So I spent a year doing my research, just knowing how the center was operating, knowing its financials, knowing if it was a good investment. And I ended up purchasing that location. So to me, having that investment in the real estate and knowing that really this is my retirement plan. So I went into it from the very beginning going, yes, I want to make a difference in these lives of these children and the families, but I want to make a difference in my life as well. And this is a long-term gain for my retirement plan. So I purchased the real estate. And then a few years later, after I met Chris and joined the academy, I flipped it around and then did the empty shell location for my second location. It had previously been a center that had been closed for a while, and it needed to be rebuilt, and I leased that one. So going into that one, knowing that I was testing the waters, so to say, like I'm going to see, like, is this going to be successful when I lease it? Is it going to run operationally? It was a new market. We did just after school location. So we ended up staying, just leasing that one, because the financial gain of leasing it versus putting the money into a mortgage was far better. So again, tons of research, tons of analysis, analyzing where your money's coming from, what's making you the most at the end. So it's smart for you, because I've said, and it took me a few years to realize this. So I'm just going to share this most important thing I learned on my journey was, when I got into this, was I creating a job for myself, or was I creating a business? So was I going to be an entrepreneur? Was I going to own a company? Was I going to own something and build a legacy? Or was I just going to create a job for myself? Because the first few years, I mean, honestly, I realized I had only created a job. I had to show up and I had to clock in, I had to clock out, sort of. But I mean, like, I had to be there and I had to do this because I didn't have team members. I didn't have the staff to do it. I didn't have the resources to do it, and got burnout very quickly. So I think if I could go backwards, Chris, probably the biggest thing, and that's why I wanted to share this, the biggest thing I would have changed was my mindset in the very beginning, that I'm creating a business and everything I'm going to build from the ground up is going to exemplify that and is going to show that. Um, and
Yeah.
yeah, now I'm a
You
little bit.
go into systems, like you became, once you had that clarity, you went from being, I'm working a job, which I don't really have. And that is like the most stressful thing too, Jen, that I'm glad you brought that up, because that's like a huge writer downer, is like, why jump into this and just create another job for yourself and be working 70 hours a week when you can shift how you're thinking about it and work on your systems and your team and your delegation automation so that you can actually create a business that has real value, you know? So I love that you brought that up.
Oh, absolutely. And I think tomorrow, during the challenge, that's one of the things we're going to be talking about, is creating those plans and right from the start, like get it right from the beginning, you know, but I think as childcare workers, so many times we lead from our heart and we don't put our business hat on our head, you know, instead of making an emotional decision, which yes, it is emotional. I guarantee you could ask any of us why, like the big why, and it's to make a difference in these lives. But we can't make it, we want to make a difference in our lives as well. So I love that slide. Like it starts with us and what do we want out of this?
Yeah, I love that, Jen. And I think that that's the biggest mistake that we see in people when they start their journey, is they don't put nearly enough thought into, how am I going to structure it from day one so that it supports me and my lifestyle and it's not going to run me ragged. And then, because what happens is that people get so, you know, excited about the bright shiny object of being a business owner, but they don't put enough thinking, effort, and structure into the front end. And that's when we see people failing, because they either don't have policies, procedures, and systems set up. They don't understand their full licensing requirements of what the building needs to support, like as micromanaging as even like, you know, the entry to the doorways and the amount of playground space that's required. And there's a lot of little detail that you guys need to bring to your startup plan to make sure that you have crossed all the T's and dotted the I's, and so you can be successful from day one. The pre-enrollment marketing plan. How is it going to cash flow? Looking at your budgeting. So there's a lot to it. And I think that's what we're bringing to the industry with this challenge, is really thinking about it as a business from the very beginning of business planning. So I love that.
Absolutely.
Anything else that you want to share with folks about, let's just dive a little bit into licensing with regard to when you're in Louisiana and you pulled up your licensing regs and you probably looked at your existing spaces, or even when you did your second space, which was a empty shell. Mm-hmm. What did you learn from the process of doing the build out and the very first time that you had to get your past licensing, that you might have been like, oh, I might have done this differently if I had gone to another empty shell. This is how I would have maybe done it differently, or anything that you learned from that process?
Oh gosh, probably a ton from that process. I'm trying to think what was the biggest one. Oh wow.
Well, how long? Let me ask you this: how long did it take to go through that process? Because there's fire marshal approval and all of that. So how long did it take you to get through that?
It really depends, Chris, quite honestly, on how busy the licensing departments are. Because with the first location, we probably started planning that out maybe 3 to 4 months before the takeover date, because it was a fully operational location. We were able to get all the licensing, and I had the benefit of that. So again, we're talking about pros and cons. That was a big pro, that we were already open, and licensing, fire marshal, health department got to come out and be like, okay, like some of these things were grandfathered in. So that's another kind of point to look at if you're looking at something already open. Like some things in your licensing can be grandfathered in, but yet for a new license and new ownership, it's going to have to be changed.
Right.
So we had to change some bathrooms. We had to change some things in the kitchen. We had to change, there was no hand washing sinks by the diaper changing tables. And so the previous owner got to put all that in there before I took over, because it wasn't up to the new licensing regulations. So that was a
Right.
huge benefit with that. Um, and then the second time with the second location, we had licensing out there and like a 30-day window. So again, I think it depends on how busy they are, but I mean, get them early. I mean, I went back and forth with the fire marshal, back and forth with the health department, back and forth with licensing. They will work with you. I mean, they're not against you. A lot of people see them as like, oh no, it's like compliance coming to see me. No, they're your best friends. They really are. And when you have questions and you want to do it right, it makes their job easier if you do it right. So I went back and forth, asked them, if I do this, what's the repercussions? Or if I only have 2 restrooms, what is that going to do to my license capacity? So there's square footage, but then, you have to take in your outdoor and your playgrounds and your kitchen. So we went back and forth planning that on the second one, because the landlord did come in and build several things up to what we wanted for licensing. And yes, that got rolled into my lease, all the changes he made, which was nice because it was no money out of pocket
Yeah.
by doing that. So it was a very easy changeover.
Yeah. And so again, back to the 3 business models, takeover is usually the fastest and can be the most, it's definitely the most cash flow positive, but you have to earn that money by taking over taking over an existing school with existing parent relationships and existing staff, maybe a reputation problem that you have to deal with and turn around. So there's definitely pros and cons to each model. All right, everybody, take care. See you soon.